When I first saw the invoice on my kitchen table, I thought it was junk mail. A glossy envelope, gold-trimmed, addressed to me in my daughter's handwriting. Inside, folded neatly, was a receipt for an engagement ring that cost more than my entire wedding, and a note that said, "Mom, please transfer your share by the 15th. Love you." For a full minute, I just stared, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. My eyes traced the numbers again and again. $7,249. I read it out loud, my voice trembling. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd held that much money in my account at once. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air. I'd forgotten breakfast. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, distant, ordinary. But inside me, something cracked. Before that letter, my life had been simple, almost peaceful. I worked 3 days a week at the public library, shelved books by afternoon, and watered my small row of succulents on Sundays. My house was modest, just 2 bedrooms and a porch that faced the west, but it was mine, quiet, predictable, safe. My daughter Emily was my pride. Ever since her father passed, I'd poured everything into her future. Tuition, dance lessons, new laptops whenever school demanded one. I managed it all on a librarian's salary and sheer stubbornness. She grew up brilliant. Confident, sometimes a little entitled, but I convinced myself she deserved the world I couldn't give myself. When she moved out after college and landed a marketing job in the city, I wept with pride. Our relationship had settled into weekly calls, short, efficient updates. She'd tell me about her projects, the new apartment, her boyfriend, Ethan. I liked Ethan. Polite, quiet, a little awkward around me, but he brought her home for holidays and always offered to do dishes. So when she called one evening, voice sparkling, and said, "Mom, he proposed," I felt that same surge of joy I'd felt the day she was born. She came home that weekend, waving her hand before she even stepped through the door. The ring glinted under the porch light, a clear-cut diamond framed in rose gold. "Isn't it beautiful?" she breathed. It was almost too beautiful. I hugged her, felt her heart racing. We stayed up late planning, scribbling ideas for venues, colors, flowers. She wanted something elegant but simple, not over the top. I remember thinking how proud I was that she wanted modesty in a world obsessed with show. But a few days later, she said, casually, over coffee, "Ethan and I decided to split the cost of the ring with a little help from family. You always said you wanted to be part of my big day?" I nodded, distracted by the whir of the kettle. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need." At the time, I thought she meant the wedding. Weeks went by. I mailed small gifts, candle sets, a planner, even a box of my wedding keepsakes she'd asked to borrow for inspiration. Each time she sent back a cheerful voice message, full of energy. Then she started texting things like, "Did you manage that transfer? And I'll need it soon so the jeweler doesn't charge extra." "Transfer? Extra?" I replied. "Honey, what transfer?" Her answer came with a laughing emoji. "For the ring, Mom? You said you'd help." "Don't worry, you can send it in parts if easier." I stared at my phone. I'd said I'd help, yes, but not like that. I imagined the bills already stacked on my counter. Utilities, car insurance, groceries. My savings barely touched 4 digits. Still, guilt has a strange power over mothers. That night, I opened my banking app and sent her $200, telling myself it was just a small contribution. She replied with 3 hearts and a, "You're the best." I smiled, even as my stomach twisted. A month later, Emily came home again, for my birthday. She arrived with Ethan and a massive bouquet of roses, her laughter filling the hallway. I hadn't seen her that carefree in years. During dinner, she talked about wedding venues, caterers, and designer dresses. When I hesitated at some of the prices, she chuckled. "Oh, Mom, times have changed. A good wedding's an investment these days." Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I went into the kitchen for water and saw her purse half open on the counter. A folder peeked out, labeled "Wedding Budget." I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but curiosity isn't always a choice. Inside was a spreadsheet. Deposits, invoices, expected contributions. Next to my name, under ring payment, was a neat column of numbers totaling over $5,000, and the note, "Due soon, partial received." I felt lightheaded, gripping the counter for balance. My own daughter had made me an entry on her balance sheet. The next morning, as we sipped coffee on the porch, I said gently, "Emily, about this ring, I think there's been some misunderstanding." She blinked, her perfect eyeliner unshaken. "What do you mean?" I thought when I said I'd help it meant emotionally, being there, not financially. "I already sent you a bit for good luck." Her smile faded. "Mom, you promised you'd help pay for it." "I told Ethan you would." "I said I'd be part of your day, darling, not your loan officer." Her jaw tightened. "You always exaggerate. It's not like I'm asking for the world. You said it yourself. You want me to have the best." The words landed like tiny knives. I didn't reply. She stood, adjusted her cardigan, and muttered, "Forget it. I'll handle it myself." That was the first time she ever left my house without hugging me goodbye. A week later, she sent another text. Polite, clipped. "Just to confirm you're not paying the rest. I'll need to adjust my accounts." Accounts. I typed and deleted my response twice before finally writing, "No, sweetheart." "I can't," she didn't reply. Days passed. Silence grew between us like an unwelcome guest. Then, one Thursday evening, as I sorted library returns, my phone buzzed with a notification. New email, invoice reminder. It was from the jeweler. Addressed jointly to Emily and me. The subject line read, "Second payment overdue." I stood frozen in the back room, the smell of old paper around me. The invoice listed both our names as buyers. Somehow she'd signed my email onto the contract. My fingers went cold. I sat there long after closing time. Lights dimmed, thinking of every sacrifice. Every sleepless night I'd spent ensuring she never had to struggle the way I did, and now she'd turned that generosity into debt. When I got home, I poured tea I didn't drink and stared at the phone until dawn. The next morning, I decided I needed answers, not through text, not through email, face to face. The drive to the city that Saturday morning felt longer than it should have. The sun hung low, pale and tired behind thin clouds, and the radio's chatter only made the silence heavier. I kept replaying our last conversation in my mind, hoping I had misunderstood. Hoping that this was all just a mix-up between her and the jeweler. Emily lived in a high-rise apartment near the river, the kind of place with mirrored elevators and people who avoided eye contact. I hadn't been there since she moved in. The moment she opened the door, I saw the tension in her shoulders. Her smile was tight, practiced. "Mom, this isn't a good time," she said, glancing behind her. "I won't stay long," I replied. "I just came to talk about the ring situation." She hesitated, then let me in. The apartment smelled of jasmine candles and takeout. On the dining table, wedding magazines were stacked beside her open laptop, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. Ethan was there too, sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. When he noticed me, he stood quickly. "Hi, Mrs. Caldwell. Everything okay?" "I'm not sure," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Maybe you can both help me understand something." I pulled the printed invoice from my bag and laid it on the table. "Why is my name on this?" Emily crossed her arms. "Because you agreed to help. I agreed to support you, not sign a financial contract I never saw." She sighed. "Mom, you're overreacting. I put your name there because the jeweler needed proof of a guarantor to get the early design rate. It's not like you're being charged. Then why am I getting payment reminders?" That silenced the room. Ethan set his phone down, his brow furrowing. "Wait, she's getting what?" I turned the paper toward him. He scanned it, confusion turning to something darker. You didn't tell me you added your mom to the contract." "I told you she was contributing," she snapped. He shook his head. "You didn't say you legally involved her." For a moment, Emily looked small, a flicker of guilt behind her eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "It's not a big deal. She said she'd pay part of it. I just made it official." I felt something collapse inside me. "Official?" I whispered. "You forged my consent." "Mom, stop making it sound criminal." I stared at her. This young woman who once slept beside me during thunderstorms, who I held after her first heartbreak. "Do you know how hard I worked to make sure you never had to worry about money? I went without new shoes for 5 years so you could have dance lessons, And now you're sending me invoices? Her face hardened. You're always bringing up the past, like I owe you for every meal you cooked. You said you wanted to be part of my happiness. Well, this is it. Ethan took a slow breath. Maybe you should apologize. Apologize? For wanting my mom to be proud of me? For expecting her to invest in something beautiful after all she's done for everyone else? Her words twisted in my chest. An investment? I murmured. In what? Your wedding or your ego? She flinched. You wouldn't understand, Mom. You've always been small, content with good enough. I'm not like that. I felt my pulse throb in my ears. That one sentence, small. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, but it was the first time it sounded like an insult. Before I could speak, Ethan grabbed his keys. I'm going for a walk, he muttered, leaving the door open behind him. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Emily turned away, staring out the window. I didn't mean it like that, she said quietly. Yes, you did, I replied. Her reflection in the glass looked older, colder. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I folded the invoice, slid it back into my bag, and stood. If I were any other woman, I'd call this fraud. But I'm your mother, so I'll call it heartbreak instead. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Mom, please don't ruin this. The wedding's already stressful. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just done paying for what should be priceless. And with that, I left. Back home, the air felt heavier, like the walls themselves disapproved of me. I spent the night pacing between the kitchen and the porch, replaying every moment of her childhood. The birthdays, the scraped knees, the graduation hug where she promised, I'll never forget everything you did for me. The next morning, I printed every email from the jeweler and filed a complaint. Not because I wanted to ruin her plans, but because I needed to protect myself. A week later, I got a call from the jeweler's office. Mrs. Caldwell, we've received your notice of dispute. Don't worry, we'll remove your name once the alternate guarantor signs. Alternate guarantor? I asked. Yes. Emily said her future mother-in-law is willing to take your place. The words hit like cold water, so that was it. I'd been replaced, not just as a guarantor, but as a mother figure too. That night, I opened my laptop and saw new photos on social media. Emily smiling beside Ethan's mother, both holding coffee cups, captions full of hearts and hashtags. Shock family dog future mom, shocked wedding countdown. Not a single mention of me. I closed the laptop, the glow fading from my face. But anger only lives where love still hides. Once I stopped expecting her apology, I felt something else. A quiet clarity. I withdrew the last $200 I had sent and wrote her a letter. No anger, no guilt, just truth. I raised you to know that love cannot be measured in receipts. If you believe otherwise, then I've failed to teach you the value of gratitude. I will always love you, but I won't fund a dream built on debt and disrespect. One day when you're older, you'll understand that giving isn't about money, it's about heart. And hearts, once broken, take longer to pay back than any loan. Love, Mom. When I mailed it, I didn't expect a reply. But 2 weeks later, an envelope came back. Inside was a single sticky note, her handwriting sharp and cold. Fine. Paid in full. Enjoy your peace. No love, no signature. I laughed, not out of humor, but relief. It was over, or so I thought, because peace doesn't arrive wrapped in silence. It comes when truth finally meets daylight. And the world was about to find out what really happened with that ring. It started quietly. A phone call from a local journalist, not one of those scandal-hunting types, but a woman I knew through the library. Marian, she said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but your daughter's wedding announcement is all over social media. They're doing a big feature in the Town Herald. I paused mid-sentence, the phone warm against my ear. I didn't know that, I said softly. They mentioned a custom ring, a family-funded heirloom design. I thought it was lovely how you helped them make it happen. The words twisted like a knife. I thanked her politely and hung up, my throat tight. Family-funded heirloom. So that was the story she was telling the world. The next day, photos began to circulate. Emily holding out her left hand, the ring flashing under studio lights. The caption read, "When love and family unite to create forever." Hundreds of comments poured in. "So sweet your mom did that for you." "A bond money can't buy." I scrolled until the screen blurred. The lie wasn't just personal anymore. It had become public mythology. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. The quiet hum of the ceiling fan filled the room, and the only light came from the small lamp by the window. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. I typed, "Proud of my daughter, even if some stories sparkle brighter than truth." Then I deleted it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted honesty. A few days later, Ethan showed up at my doorstep. It was raining, the kind of steady drizzle that soaks you before you even reach the porch. He looked nervous, his suit jacket damp. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, removing his cap. "I need to talk to you." "Come in." "Ethan?" He stepped inside, wiping his shoes carefully on the mat. The same habit he had back when he first started dating Emily. "I didn't know about the article," he began. "And I didn't know about the invoice until that day you came over. Emily said she'd fix everything, but she didn't." I watched him lower his eyes, shame softening his features. "She took out a loan in both your names. When you withdrew, the jeweler came after us. I paid it off last week," my breath caught. "You paid it?" He nodded. "I didn't want your credit ruined." "You didn't deserve that." For the first time in months, I felt seen. "Thank you," I whispered. He exhaled slowly. "There's something else. Her mother-in-law didn't sign anything. Emily just told people she did. It's all been for show." The sound of rain against the window deepened. He looked like a man torn between loyalty and exhaustion. "She's been under pressure," he said quietly. "Trying to impress everyone. I love her, but I can't build a life on lies." He stood, straightened his jacket, and before leaving said, "You're the only honest person left in this mess. I thought you should know." When he left, the room smelled faintly of wet fabric and regret. The wedding was 6 weeks away. I didn't attend. People whispered, at the library, at the market. Some pitied me. Others assumed there'd been a family rift over money. They weren't wrong. On the day of the ceremony, I sat by the window, listening to the faint echo of church bells from across town. I imagined her walking down the aisle, veil flowing, eyes bright with ambition. Then my phone buzzed. "A text. From Ethan. It's over." She called it off at the altar. I froze. "What happened?" She couldn't go through with it. Said she felt like she'd been performing. Left in her dress before vows. I stared at the message until tears blurred my vision. Maybe, somewhere beneath all that pride and pressure, my daughter had finally felt the weight of her own deception. A month later, she came home. No announcement, no text, just the sound of a car door and the familiar shuffle of her steps on the porch. When I opened the door, she stood there in jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back, her face bare. For the first time in a long while, she looked like the girl I used to know. "Mom," she whispered. "Can I come in?" The word mom broke something in me. I stepped aside. We sat in silence for a long time, both holding mugs of tea gone cold. Finally, she spoke. I was wrong. About everything. Her voice trembled, fragile as paper. I wanted everything to look perfect. The ring, the wedding, the life. But I ruined it because I didn't want anyone to see how scared I was. That I couldn't live up to you. "Up to me?" I asked, startled. She nodded. "You built a life alone. You paid bills, raised me, kept the house. I thought if I didn't have something big, something shiny, I'd look small in comparison." Tears spilled down her cheeks, quiet and unguarded. I thought money could fill what love had already given me. I reached across the table, took her hand, the same hand that once clung to mine crossing streets. "Emily, you don't have to buy beauty. You are it when you're honest." She cried harder then, shoulders shaking, years of pride dissolving between us. I canceled the payments, she whispered. And I returned the ring. I'm starting over. Relief washed through me. Not triumph, not vindication. Just the stillness that comes after a storm. We spent the rest of the evening talking. Really talking for the first time in years. About her childhood, her fears, my loneliness. The kind of conversation that stitches two hearts back together slowly, carefully. Weeks passed, and she began visiting often. We planted roses in the front yard, baked pies on Sundays, laughed about silly TV shows. One morning, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, the old ring gleaming against a dark velvet box, with a handwritten note. Not every jewel is meant to be worn. Some are lessons we carry forever. I smiled, folding the note gently. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. When I look back now, I realize the ring was never the real issue. It wasn't about carats or price tags or even betrayal. It was about what we think love owes us, and how easily we confuse sacrifice with debt. I used to believe being a good mother meant giving endlessly, never saying no, never keeping score. But sometimes love needs boundaries just as much as it needs warmth. Because when we teach others that our generosity has no limit, we quietly teach them to forget its value. That ring became our mirror. It reflected not just her desire for perfection, but my own silence. The years I smiled through discomfort, paid through pain, forgave without being asked. When I finally said enough, it wasn't anger. It was awakening. I think we all reach a moment like that. When love must stop being a currency and start being a conversation. Emily and I are still learning that balance. We still argue, still misread each other, but now there's honesty between us. No more receipts, no more performance. Just the simple, fragile effort of two women trying to love each other better. The roses we planted last spring have started to bloom again. Their petals open quietly each morning, soft and unpretentious. When I see them, I think of her. Of who she was, who she's becoming, and who I've had to become too. Because forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a practice. It's the decision to remember pain without reliving it. And as strange as it sounds, I'm grateful for that ring. The one that once divided us now serves as a reminder of what really lasts. Not gold, not diamonds, but grace. Would you have paid for that ring if it meant losing your peace? Or would you, like me, finally learn that love doesn't need proof? It just needs presence. Tell me what you think in the comments. And if this story reminded you of something in your own family, share it. Someone out there might need to hear that healing is possible, even after the sharpest cuts. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, take care of your heart and those who truly treasure it.